So, Margot, what is it? It's been wreaking havoc with the instruments and the gaming consoles. The interference is uncanny.
Commander, why do you always talk like that when there's a scientific anomaly?
Talk like what? This is just how I talk.
I'm going to check the sensor data. You should man the con.
Con!
Loud, audible sigh.
Get upset on the internet.
Hi everyone and welcome to Retro Station 1989. I'm Commander Dan, the commander and lone human inhabitant of the Retro Station. Along for the ride are Margot and Cambot Jr. and my friend Splat, who I've sent off to do something very useful for the time being. I hope he understands what that meant. I'm sure he will. He's a very smart boy. I think he's less than a year old and made of rectal polyp. But, speaking of rectal polyps, this is Licensed to Play, where we review licensed video games based on, things like movies or TV shows or comic books, superheroes, breakfast cereal mascots, fast food mascots, hell, even comics from the 20s. We got it all here. And let me tell you, folks, this week's going to be kind of a doozy. We're coming to the end of the second season of Licensed to Play, and of course we've got one of those, crazy astronomic anomaly things that space shows always seem to come up against at the end of a season. Margot, what do we know?
It appears to be a field of electromagnetic interference and what appears to be a tangle of radiological energy and tachyon particles.
Wow, that's awesome!
Commander, this anomaly is an unknown quantity. It is incredibly dangerous. It is impressive, but I'm sure you meant awesome colloquially. I can't imagine why.
Well, yeah. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be involved in some Star Trek stuff. It's awesome.
And dangerous.
And it's awesome. Spock, damn your Vulcan logic. I know it's dangerous, but stop competing with me. Are you out of your Vulcan mind?
You're impossible like this. I will attempt to correct this communications breakdown through first-hand knowledge. One moment, processing all data regarding Star Trek.
Whoa, watch out when you get to the fan fiction. It can be a little...
Oh my word.
Yeah.
However, I now understand why you talk like that during emergencies.
I just can't help myself. Spock!
Yes, humorous. But the anomaly threatening the station is decidedly not.
Cambot Jr., give me external cameras if you would, please.
Will do, Commander. Here you go.
That's different, isn't it, Margot?
Affirmative, Commander.
Okay, let's do this. CB Jr.?
Yes, boss?
Put half the exterior cameras into infrared and multiple sensor scaling. Let's keep an eye on this thing in as many spectrums as we can possibly manage.
Yes, sir.
I'll continue compiling these readings to come up with a description of the anomaly that fits with Earth's descriptors. Don't forget, Commander, the sponsors require...
No problem. Well, this week, we're reviewing Star Trek...
Sorry to interrupt, Commander, but the sponsors from Planet X have a request.
Whoa. A request? Really? What do they want me to evaluate this time?
Inbound, heads up.
Oh, come on. Really, this? Folks, to explain this game, we're going to have to talk about something on the cover. All right? No, not the license or the Acclaim logo that's on here. We're going to have to talk about the little golden seal of approval. Basically how Nintendo legally manipulated a market like a robber baron manipulated, newspapers and child labor. Only video games. This is the Gaming Historian. If you're not subscribed to his channel, you're behind the curve on your gaming history, bud. Norman Caruso has made a job out of learning everything about gaming people might want to know, and is one of the authorities out there that I trust. He has videos on anomalies like the Nomad by Sega and the Aladdin Deck Enhancer for NES. Today, I've used his videos to refresh my memory about the seriously anti-consumer stuff Nintendo seemed to be doing in the 80s, because it relates to this thing, the official Nintendo seal of quality. Are you an owner of any Nintendo products? Then you have a copy of this seal in your home right now. The Switch, Amiibos, hell, even on this third-party Mario controller and the Nintendo Power magazine itself, you're going to see that seal. The seal was introduced with the Nintendo Entertainment System in the black box games, and was meant to be used on every Nintendo product in America. But why is this seal so important to Nintendo of America? And why, for example, does my copy of Super Mario All-Stars for Super Famicom not have that seal, but my SNES copy of Super Mario World does? It starts with a couple things happening all at once in America in the 80s. First, when Warner Communications took over Atari in 1981, they decided to bet a lot on two licenses. First, Pac-Man in 82. That license was plasma level hot, and the image of Pac-Man was everywhere at the time. Lunchboxes, posters, everywhere. I know it's insane, but imagine you turn on the radio and someone is singing about Fortnite in a parody hip-hop track that people would request so much and so often that the song itself would sell 500,000 copies. Not on Spotify, but bought the track in a store on a record. That actually happened in 1981. And the track? Pac-Man Fever. The game, of course, was Pac-Man. Just by this file footage, you can see that Pac-Man was a solid gold printing press for money in 81. Atari put their minds to work to get that overworked mule, the Atari 2600, to run a version of Pac-Man. And when I say a version, that's being generous. First, Pac-Man only resembles Pac-Man if you have severe glaucoma, or you're in a coma. Second, he doesn't eat pills, or even dots. Dude eats wafers, and instead of power pills, Energizer dots, which were squares. Because damn near everything on Atari 2600 was squares. Ghost Eyes, squares. Knight on a Quest, square. The dragon facing the knight, a bunch of squares shaped like a duck, made of squares. Even Donkey Damn Kong was a big deformed square. I love the Atari 2600, but I ain't Amish. I'm no Luddite. I love the Atari for the memories I hold playing Atari with my dad and my brother and my cousin Eric in my aunt and uncle's basement. I love the Atari the way I recognize that without this weird-ass thing, we wouldn't have this thing. The other license that Atari bet on was E.T. Not the worst game ever made, to be honest. Not even the worst game on Atari or worst licensed game. A-Team is a bigger wading pool of hog vomit than E.T. ever was. Oh man, there's so many worse games than E.T. and less ambitious on the Atari. E.T., we'll get to you one day. But these two licenses, due to Warner Communications' internal belief that the game itself doesn't matter. Gamers are idiots, and quality doesn't matter if the license is hot, in the case of Pac-Man, and we bet a lot of dough on E.T.'s license, and they hope to get a better working relationship with Universal and Steven Spielberg in the case of E.T., so they made more copies of E.T. than the Atari 2600 existing player base. They thought that E.T. was the game that was going to sell people the Atari. It did not. These two facts, along with just a ton of shovelware being crapped out from all corners of the globe, stressed the video game market in the United States and precipitated the video game crash of 1983, which killed the U.S. home video game market dead. Consumer faith in the ability of the electronics industry delivering anything close to the arcades, which still thrived during those years of Atari's interregnum in the home market. For 2 years, the arcades were fine, but home, no way. They thought if you have a video game, it's going to be garbage.
That's right. My family still owned an Atari, but we never touched it. I was busy on my Tandy or my best friend's, Commodore 64, my buddy Mike. I mean, everything, both of those things blew the Atari away. And honestly, the gameplay on the Commodore 64 basically eclipsed Atari in every possible category. And we all just kind of forgot about the 2600. I mean, I did. And the Atari never existed at all, to be honest.
It was crazy. I was 9 years old. At one point in 1982, Atari was so popular we had guests every Friday night in our apartment to play Combat and Warlords. Combat!
Come on, Combat. Yeah, Combat. Combat.
Gang Combat! Yeah, Combat. It was like one day, Combat had grown men competing and partying like it was the introduction of Mario Kart. And the next,
everyone agreed that Atari was terrible. Video games as a concept were still popular, making advances in the arcades, delivering some big hits during that time, but at home, video games were like bell bottoms or the Mattel Electronics games. But then, in 1985's holiday season, Nintendo brought video games wrapped in a toyetic concept to a wary marketplace. The Nintendo Entertainment System, sold in toy stores, sold out of toy stores, and marketed as a vaguely entertaining toy device that you had to experience to believe. The Nintendo intrigued, then consumed every American family's interest in video games. One facet was the way Nintendo branded everything, emphasizing inclusivity for everyone in the family, and moreover, emphasizing quality. Hell, damn near guaranteeing quality. And while it's cliche to equate Nintendo to Disney, they're very similar in two ways: terminology and quality. You go to a Disney theme park and everything has its own Disney terminology. Employees are all cast members. Employee-only areas, well, that's backstage. Terminology unique to the place makes the place unique. The Nintendo Entertainment System, same thing. Atari had cartridges, so Nintendo said to hell with that. NES carts were called game packs. Everything in the NES had elements of jargon that made the Nintendo feel different from anything else that had come before. The power pad, Rob the robot. The light gun? Nope, not a gun. The zapper. No joysticks here. We now have system controllers. All internal Nintendo terminology specific to the NES and moving forward through to the Nintendo 64 includes specific terms for things people thought they already knew about. But these things put Nintendo on a different level from anyone thinking of competing in the video game marketplace, which shows just how intelligent Nintendo were about this venture. The box art, for example. Box art for the black box games featured enlarged versions of actual gameplay sprites on the front of the box. And the screenshots on the back were not bull shots. They were real shots of what the game looked like. Whereas Atari, just a year before, would have covers like this. What the hell is this game supposed to be? Going by the art alone, I'd say that's the title. But no, this is Defender. How about this one? Nope. It's just a million different versions of checkers. And this one? Every sport ever? In Pong format? No. They had the unmitigated balls to call this program Video Olympics. Fun fact, this game is the only game ever in the history of video games to win the elusive, illustrious tin medal for gaming design and naming. What a pile of junk. Sadly, however, it was stripped of that honor for its backing of the Black Panther movement. Shame, really. Seriously, though, here's what these games actually looked like. A bunch of squares doing square shit in a square universe that just required you to, oh my god, just invest so much into them. Atari 2600 required a healthy imagination to play, to go from this art to this is a game. Now look at the Nintendo starting lineup. Wild Gunman, Kid Icarus, Super Mario Bros., Excitebike. These covers are showing you the exact game. Meanwhile, Atari gives you Leroy Neiman on the cover, and when you open it up, you get this jackassery. And on every game pack, this bad boy. The official Nintendo seal of quality.
Commander, I'll have some preliminary theories in a few moments.
Thanks, Margot. Cambot Jr.?
Yes, Commander.
Can we take another look outside, please?
Absolutely, Commander Dan. 1 second. And...
Holy crap! Margot, is that thing getting closer, or are we getting closer to it, or is it getting bigger?
Commander, I fear this may not be an either-or proposition. I'll have more information momentarily.
Let's continue. And folks, that thing outside looks like it wants to become a professional pain in my ass.
In 1983, the video game industry imploded due to the avalanche of shovelware. Maybe it's more accurate to call it a landfill of shovelware. In any case, the US consumers viewed home video gaming as a big snake oil boondoggle mixed with a little fraud and overpromising and underdelivering. That's why Nintendo marketed the NES as a toy in toy stores. And it promised on every product that anything made for the NES was upheld to Nintendo's high level of quality.
And that's why, in the US, every Nintendo product that's officially licensed by Nintendo bears the seal either on the item or the item's packaging, because that seal was required to sell products for Nintendo hardware. Which brings us to how weird getting the seal could be, especially for licensed content. Like I said before, people equate Nintendo's corporate philosophy to Disney's. So imagine you're walking through Toys R Us, which you'll have to do because toy stores are a part of history now, and in the Disney aisle, you see this. Complete with a Disney logo on it. You'd shit your pants, complain to the manager, and then cry yourself to sleep over the decline of the fabric of American culture and decency. Maybe. I don't know. That's the feeling I got when I saw this poster at my friend Glenn's house. He was a hardcore Nintendo kid. I had a PC, but Glenn had a Nintendo, and damn near every game from the opening salvo of games that were out at the time. But he had this game, which blew my mind. Jaws. I was astonished that Nintendo would have put their legendary seal of quality on a Jaws game. I gave Jaws its own license to play in my second episode. It's one of my favorite games, but I also saw that a Friday the 13th game was coming out for the NES on the poster. I only played one other Friday the 13th game, and it scared the shit poops out of me. I was like, what? I was mesmerized. And then Nintendo Power showed that a Nightmare on Elm Street game was coming for NES later on. And the list goes on. RoboCop, Terminator, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Dirty Harry, Die Hard, Total Recall, The Untouchables, Platoon, Predator. And today's title, Rambo for the NES. That's right, we're talking about Rambo by Acclaim for the NES, which is just another name for LJN. Folks, don't get it twisted. And today, we're going to evaluate the game as a game and a representation of the license.
Commander, sorry to interrupt. I have formulated a theory as to the anomaly we are facing outside the station.
No sweat, Margot. What are we looking at?
It appears to be a dimensional rift that affects space-time in a specific location.
Come again? Pretend you're talking to an infant with learning disabilities.
Of course, Commander. It's a time hole that has manifested itself over a traditional wormhole, creating a storm of tachyon pulses that may also serve as an Einstein-Rosen bridge.
So it's a time worm. That's also a bridge?
Sure.
Is it dangerous?
Not if we get out of the way, Commander, which I've prepared the maneuvering jets and solar sails to do immediately upon your command.
Great work, Margot. I command you to get us the hell out of that thing's way while I go over the license for today's evaluation. Any word from the sponsors from Planet X?
Negative, Commander Dan.
All right, keep me posted. Okay, folks, this is Rambo for the NES. And let's talk about Rambo for a minute to get an idea why the folks at Nintendo and Acclaim decided the NES was the perfect vehicle for this license. Vietnam. I won't go into it much, really, other than it was a war that took a toll on the United States morale and robbed most of their political innocence. Many films have been made about the war or featured the war as a major aspect. Apocalypse Now, Platoon, and even Forrest Gump. But there are also films that deal with the aftermath and how that war left our veterans shattered. The Deer Hunter, Born on the 4th of July. Damn, Forrest Gump again? And today's license, First Blood. Yeah, the first film about John Rambo was based on a book. Remember those? The paper things that people stack on their shelves to prove to everyone it looks like they know how to read? Anyway, the character Rambo was created by David Morrell for his first novel, First Blood. And while John Rambo in the film, First Blood, is just a Vietnam vet drifter with PTSD and is victimized by some pretty brutal cops, Rambo of the novel is way more whacked out. I mean, he disembowels a cop with a straight razor, blows up half the town, and works with moonshiners to get a rifle to kill cops, who happily help him out, and is not very sympathetic as a character, which, in the film version, they humanize this human killbot by giving him a first name, a friend who he hasn't talked to in a long time, and a Peckerwood sheriff who hates hippies to harass John Rambo on his way through town and put him through some changes, as my mom would say when I was a kid. Or she got it from her friend who was Haitian. Putting him through changes. Boy, look at this. The film is great. John Rambo flees the cops who try to go apeshit and kill him, like cops sometimes do, but they're dealing with the original badass. Rambo brings retribution down on the cops and blows up a gas station until finally surrendering to Colonel Troutman, his former CO. There's a scene where Teasel, the sheriff, is explained just exactly how they have screwed up by messing with John Rambo, and it's one of the classic all-time greatest scenes ever. In one of Stallone's best acted scenes ever, he breaks down over his trauma and the events of the film, and it's fantastic. It's one of those things that is very emotional and not out of place for a Stallone flick if you actually know the guy who's in the movies. The movie did great numbers at the box office, and the sequel was a no-brainer. And the sequel, Rambo: First Blood Part 2, is very much about no brains. It's a fantasy film for people who believe that all-American military adventurism is justified and believe we could win lost wars by sending in one lone warrior and could rescue men thought lost to battle or still imprisoned who may probably just have been killed and missing or blown to smithereens by our own bombs. Now, I love Rambo, and Rambo 3, and John Rambo. I never saw Last Blood because the Mexican caravans of MS-13 murdering rapists killed my family and me, and then raped us. And then caravanned us, or whatever they did. But actually, it's because it plays into that xenophobic fear, horse shit of the last 4 years, and it seems like it's an effort to worship at the feet of our last president and his racially charged nonsense. I could be wrong, because I ain't seen it. But Rambo in America waging war against the cartels sure seems sus as all hell. Anyway, Rambo did so well that tons of related media and licensed products flowed forth. Toys, toy guns, cartoons. Yes, Rambo cartoons, which is probably what spawned this conversation at Acclaim. Hey, Rambo is for kids now! You mean the guy who disemboweled a police officer with a straight razor in the novel First Blood? Yup. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Video games! I mean, I could be wrong about that, but, I'm not. It got so bad with marketing Rambo for kids, they even tried creating a made-for-public TV educational show.
It's reading Rambo.
So, given all that kid pandering, what else could they do but make a Rambo video game? And that brings us to today's game, and evaluating whether or not it has a license of... Whoa! Margot, status report!
Would you like it in infant with brain damage terms?
Oh, ha ha! No, just a status report, please.
Commander, the station is moving away from the anomaly, but we're encountering gravitational turbulence. We are in limited physical danger.
Limited to what, exactly?
To the human body's anatomical resistance to horrifying gravitational forces.
That would be really not at all.
Correction, we, as in Cambot Jr. and I, are in limited danger. You and Splat should maintain a heightened sense of alarm.
Good to hear. And the sponsors from Planet X?
They will await your evaluation of the title while the anomaly proceeds.
Well, that said, let's dive into the Rambo video game and the franchise and take a look at today's game, Rambo for NES by Acclaim. I know what you're thinking. Rambo is a video game? Well, it's not a surprise, really. Since in the arcades, the US was given a Rambo-like action game called ATARI Warriors 2 years before. Had some of the same beats of the Rambo flick, including a main character that looked like Rambo, with helicopters and fighting in a jungle setting against characters who looked a lot like the People's Army, the VC. So it's like, it was like Rambo. There was a Rambo game for the Commodore 64 and the other micros that was actually my first Rambo video game experience. And it was an ocean game. And you know what that means? They take a template that works, in this case Commando, and slap a license on it. In this case, Rambo. Rambo Commando. Oh, wait. I don't know if AVGN knew about that when he made that joke, but it's true. Ask anyone from the United Kingdom about how many games were based on the RoboCop game architecture, and you'll understand what I mean. We also got a Sega Master System game where Rambo saves multiple Hulk Hogans until he finally gets to go to spring break. But not before he goes apeshit on Teasel and the whole damn town of Yokopoke, Kentucky, or whatever the hell it was, as a little bonus flashback mission from First Blood about halfway through the game. Which, by the way, in Japan was called something else, Yashura, I think. And it has the same music, the same kick-ass music, but it's a completely different game. Which brings us to the NES version. RAMBO by Acclaim, designed by Pac-In Video, was released in the US in May of 1988. It's a single-player action-adventure title that resembles in many ways The Legend of Zelda Adventures of Link. The designer, Fukuchan Tokita, seems to have loved the RPG elements Nintendo added to the Zelda game and decided that Nintendo was paving the way for how games would be expanded on in the future. He backed the wrong horse on that one because it didn't turn out that way. A lot of people seem to hate the second Zelda entry. I don't know why, and I don't hate it, but yeah, folks think it's not a real example of great Nintendo masterwork, and also that Zelda doesn't need to be like that. Looking at you, Breath of the Wild. Apparently, it does need to be kind of like that. However, Rambo is the victim of that over-reliance on the manual to explain everything. By 1988, game rentals were getting insanely popular. Video rental shops, grocery stores, and even some smaller town gas stations were renting video games. But most of the time without manuals at all. Part of Nintendo's scheme to make sure that you couldn't rent video games either. They made it so that holding the manual, or including the manual in a rental, was violating copyright in some way. Man, Nintendo hates customers sometimes. It's just so crazy. Anyway, Rambo's manual is pretty hefty, with 22 pages of text, and about 4 of them are just about how to control the character of Rambo. Check this out. And once in the game, it unfolds like the movie. Rambo is sprung from a military prison for his antics in First Blood, and is sent to Vietnam to find and photograph any possible POWs still in country. Photograph? That's right, Rambo's mission is to photograph the POWs and come back to the base, leaving them there to whatever happens to them. If they happen to be found out, he doesn't care. He's there to take pictures, not prisoners, and he's there not to engage the enemy. Do not engage is what he's told in the movie. And, it's horrible. It's a horrible statement about our bureaucracy and everything. And then he comes to find that the pictures weren't going to be used anyway. But that part's in the movie, in the game as well as the movie. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the movie in the game. His doomed love interest Co is in the game as well. Only not as doomed as she was in the movie. Rounding out the cast is Murdoch, the pencil-pushing bureaucrat, hoping that Rambo fails, because POWs being in country means an international incident would erupt following, and our country had all of the war-mongering squeezed out of it for the time being, even in the 80s. The game is played over a map, like an open world, a la Metroid or Castlevania 2, where you have a couple of goals: finding and rescuing the POWs, defeating bosses that the manual calls special enemies to raise your health level so you survive the mission, and also gather all the weapons that the enemies have that you can use. These include the bow and arrow, a throwing knife, machine gun, and grenades. And also you have your trusty regular knife that stabs out like a sword, just like in Zelda. Rambo is a Metroidvania with a dash of Legend of Zelda 2 thrown in, using an open world concept. It's actually pretty far ahead of its time. One of the things that makes the game really playable is the diversity of enemies and places to stab the crap out of them. The environments are great. You travel through a jungle, a series of caves, villages, where people will give you side quests and request help, and military bases. The enemies include nature's strongest killers, snakes and spiders and bats. But there are also motorcycle riders, a robot, a skeleton, a fire cat, which is a cat that's on fire that shoots fire at you, like in a jungle, like in the very real world of Rambo. And a panther, who's just a very dangerous panther. Also, a skull. I want to pretend that those are his PTSD acting up, because it doesn't make any damn sense. The human enemies are 3 types of commandos: a hand-to-hand commando, a gun commando, and a grenade commando. There's also the Russian leader, and a helicopter encounter that is a literal hell on earth. Look at this garbage. Oh my god. I'm getting flashbacks and emotional trauma, and it's just from this video game. Rambo as a game is complex, difficult without the manual, but has a great look, with the exception of Red Jammy's Rambo, which has some kitsch value, since they made a toy version at any rate. But the The question remains.
Commander Dan, we have moved the station out of the range of the tachyon storm. We should be at a minimum safe distance to send this week's evaluation without difficulty.
Okay, what about our physical safety? CB Jr., how does it look out there? Great. And to wrap up this piece of business, does Rambo for the NES have a license to play? Yes. However, prepare yourself for an adventure game that's kind of a role-playing game with RPG-style advancement and a close but elaborated version of the Rambo flick where everything is amped up 80s style. And more than that, grab a manual scan from your website of choice. Mine is vim.net usually, but I grabbed mine from digitpress.com's archives this time. You're going to need the manual to play the game. Check it out and give it a chance, but you don't have to take my word for it.
Butterfly flying by, I could shoot you in the eye. I'd shoot you dead, right in the head, because I'm reading Rambo. I can shoot anything. I shoot that dude, his rocket too, because I'm reading Rambo. I can shoot anywhere, because I'm in a Jeep while your parents sleep. I'm reading Rambo. I'm reading Rambo.
All right. I hope he can help you learn to read. And I'm glad he blew up the butterfly or whatever. Ah, kid stuff. Anyway, folks, remember to take care of your old games. Don't forget to check this one out. And, more than anything else, don't forget to stay retro. Peace.
Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. You're a salt adult. Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. Throwing out a hissy fit, your views ain't in the millions, and every up and comer is a threat to what you're dealing. And instead of getting better, you just spout up on your Facebook, crying on your Twitter bit about how bad your case look. In case you didn't get it yet, allow me to rephrase it. You're more than my 4-year-old, I'm actually amazed. Like you couldn't even see the forest for the trees. The writing's on the wall, literally that a seed. How you getting salt that a culture blowing up, man? I think there was a point where you stopped growing up, man. Instead of showing up, man, irrationally mad. Don't appropriate impression like the latest fashion fad. It isn't cool or funny to be acting like an edgelord. You alienate friends, pushing closer to the edge more. I don't know how to say it anyway to make it clear. If you're the one unhappy, then the problem's in the mirror. Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. You're a salt adult. Get upset on the internet. You're a salt adult. The net is a repository for the vast expanses of human knowledge and all the technological advances, and I can't say enough how